Welcome to This Organized Life. If you're a mom, wife, or coffee lover seeking advice on how to reduce clutter and reclaim time, look no further than your host, Laurie, founder of Simply Be Organized and author of Hot Mess, a practical guide to getting organized. For a lot of people, clutter is their dirty little secret, but it doesn't have to be. Each week, we will share practical tips, chat with experts, and provide strategies on how to keep you organized. I hope that by sharing our stories, you feel a little less alone and more empowered to tackle the areas that are holding you back. So let's get started.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of This Organized Life podcast. I'm your host, Laurie, and I'm jazzed for these next two episodes because if you have been with us for a while, you know that the last 2 weeks of the year, we do our best of and favorite series. And joining me for today's episode, or for the next two episodes rather, is none other than my right arm podcast producer and editor, Miss Kimberly Hermann. So welcome back to the show, Kimberly.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good.
You're like, hey, so don't want to be here, but I am.
No, of course I want to be here.
Well, I feel like you're the best person to be a guest or co-host on these episodes because you've listened to this show more than anybody. And
yes,
multiple times each episode.
Multiple times. Yes.
I love doing these episodes because I think it's fun. We don't really talk about ours.
Fun.
Yeah.
And we don't really like throughout the year, we don't really talk about like what our favorite episodes were, or what the like we just look at it at the end, and I kind of like, oh, this is one of my favorites, but we don't really like talk about why they're our favorite till these episodes.
Yes, because we're so busy planning for the next guest and the next thing that's coming up that we'll be like, oh yeah, that was a good episode or not, but we don't really deep dive. And then we come together and we don't talk about it. And so it's funny because I have my list and you have your list, and I have no idea if they even overlap or not. So I think it'll be fun to see.
It'll be fun.
Before we get into all that, I don't want you to get mad at me, so I'm going to tell our listeners, because I always forget. You guys, we have been waiting to launch this. We finally launched our free subscription model for anybody that's interested. So again, this has been an incredible journey up until this point. We are able to continue producing our show because we have advertisers who allow us to monetize this. So I can pay amazing people like Kimberly to do this, to produce this show. But I know sometimes ads can be annoying, and I get it. And so we have offered for people that don't want to listen to ads an ad-free version on Apple subscription. And I believe it's $4.99 a month, or there's like a bundle if you buy, like, get it now for the year. And I think we're doing like whatever you lock in now, your rate, you are locked in, you are grandfathered in. And so I forget what it is. I don't want to quote it. I don't remember what we netted on for that amount.
I'm not sure. I'll have to look. We can put it in the show notes.
Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes. But again, we're just grateful that you listen to our show, whether you want to support our sponsors and listen to it for free, or if you're like, hey, I want to just be, cut to the chase. Let me get to the content and move on with my day. That's fine too. So check that out. We have all the different like benefits that you'll be getting, including our early access to episodes, the tip of the week, all the fun things. So there you have it, people. Anything else that we need to mention?
I don't think there's any other housekeeping items.
No other housekeeping items?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, I'm going to default to...
Oh, of course.
Well...
That's fine. No, it's good. We're good. I'll go first.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let's kick off. So this episode is going to have your top five, just to kind of set the stage. Yes. Kimberly has her top five, I have my top five, and we're going to give a little debrief of each of those episodes. So you go first. What was your favorite, or one of your top fives?
So one of my favorites was episode 336, Why I Take On So Much with Rebecca Ann. I find this really interesting, only because sometimes I take on too much in my life. And, it really resonated with me because I'm like, I'm allowed to say no sometimes. I'm allowed to not take on that project or that client or what have you.
Yes, I am all about that. So,
Yes.
and I like her. She was super fun. And
It was
just
super
again,
fun.
we will be linking to all of these episodes. So if you haven't listened to them, we're going to make it really easy for you. Just check in the show notes wherever you're listening, and you'll be able to just click and check them out. So that was a good one. Okay. So I'm going to do my list kind of from the bottom up. So number 5 down to number 1. Number 5 was during the Enneagram and Clutter series, which I really liked a lot of our guests that we had. But if I had to pick one, I'm choosing the episode with Krista Harden, which was episode 356. So throughout that series, it was a 5-part series where we looked at each of the 5 clutter pitfalls: procrastination, indecision, guilt, overwhelm, and time. And so I had a different Enneagram expert come in and talk about how each of the different types could deal with one of those. And so Krista came in and was talking all about time, how we use our time, and how that can look different for each of the different types. And it was just a fun conversation, and I really like her. And so again, it was a great series, but I love that one. It was good.
Yeah, it was a good one.
Okay,
For sure.
You're up.
The next one is going to be episode 322, Baby Prep and Nursery Organization, with Mary, Beth, Barlette, and Megan McDowell. I just like this one because I have a couple friends who just had babies, and I'm like, oh, we can decorate your nursery, and give me some ideas for how to make sure it's all organized for them. So
they were so cute.
They were so cute. They're like best friends, and they started this business together. They were so cute.
And I love they were talking about, again, I don't want to give too much spoiler alert away because I want everyone to go listen to the episode, but I love how they were prepping. They helped their clients with like prepping the fridge with like one-handed snacks, whether you're like breastfeeding, you're always holding a baby and you need to do things like just the way that they were like thinking things through was so spot on. I was like, oh my gosh. And I'm so far removed from that season right now. It was really nice to talk about that again.
Yeah, and they would come in like after you had the baby and like make sure everything was like set for you, and like you didn't have to worry about, the little tiny things that you don't think about when you're, first of all, when you're a first-time mom, much less when you have multiple kids and you're like, how do I manage everything?
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
So
okay, so there is a lot here. The next 4 were really like, there is a lot. Okay. So episode 357 was Clutter and Anxiety with Dr. John Deloney. So I'm a huge fan. So this has made my top 5 for a couple of reasons. First of all, I'm a huge John Deloney fan. For those of you who don't know him, he's part of the Ramsey Network. He's wrote a couple best-selling books, and he just has a new book out all about rebuilding an unanxious life is what it's called. And he came on our show and talked all about the link between clutter and anxiety, which we all know is very, very interwoven. So it was a really great conversation. He was kind and generous. And again, as somebody who was personally like, not fangirl, but somebody that I respect and admire, it's always nice when I am able to sit down and have a conversation. But I do think that the topic was so, so relevant. And I just thought there was a lot of really great nuggets of wisdom in that episode.
Oh yeah, I like that episode too. But I didn't want to overlap too much, so I didn't pick that one. But I like that. I like that episode a lot. He had a lot of good information in there that just made a lot of sense when you go back and listen to it. It's like, oh, I never thought about it that way. All right, let's do it that way. See what happens. So
good. All right, you're up.
Okay, sorry. My next one is episode 333, Core Values with Kate Bosch. She has a very interesting way of like what she calls her 5 C's, and how she applies them to her physical stuff you have in your home. And I think that was a really interesting way of like breaking it down when you're overwhelmed by your stuff.
Yeah. And Kate's been a guest on our show a couple times. She's one of our SBO partners. She runs her own organizing business up in Rhode Island, and just really smart, savvy. And we have just a lot of kind of similarities in our philosophy of how we approach organizing and clutter and all the things. And yeah, this was a really great episode all about kind of thinking about why are we doing this in the first place?
Right.
What's important to you? And if you're going to be working with a professional organizer, if you're somebody that's hiring somebody, like what's important to you when you're hiring somebody? So it was just really great. I love Kate. So I think that's
Kate's one
definitely
of the good ones for sure.
top 5 worthy for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the next one was such a fun episode for me. It was episode 348, which is organizing tips that you learned from your mom. And that was with Janet Taylor. Janet's also a professional organizer. And she and I were talking all about like the learned behaviors, good and bad, that we've inherited from our moms or maybe our grandmoms, or could be like aunts, you know what I mean? But the people, the influencers in our life from childhood. And I never really kind of looked at it through that lens specifically. And it was just really interesting to hear her take in the things that she's learned from her mom that she still does, and other things that people, like we heard from listeners who are like, I learned this bad habit, and so I don't do it. Like it was it worked on both ends.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely can identify with the bad habits. And then you're like, oh no, that's not going to happen at our house.
Oh, I think a lot of people can.
A lot of people identify with that. It was a good episode. I think it was insightful, and just, again, thinking about things that you've probably never put thought into before, so I think it really broke down exactly why you may do things you do. And that's kind of how this Organized Life podcast goes anyway, is like rethinking what you're doing in your life to make it more organized. So I think that's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Okay, your next one. Number 4 for you.
Number 4 for me is going to be episode 359, Secrets of a Supermom, with Laurie. Not even going to try and say her last name, but
it's
with Laurie
Oberbreckling.
Yes, that's it.
It's spelled, it's got like a lot of vowels, like my name.
It's got a lot of vowels in it. Pronunciation is not my forte, so I'm just going to skip that one. And so I like this episode because you can get in a trap of feeling like you have to do it all and it has to be Instagram worthy. And she really dispels that idea of, you don't have to do it all. It's okay if you miss things, and it's okay if you quit your job and do something else,
Yeah. And I like it. And it's funny when she just like sidebar backstory, when she first kind of like pitched herself to be on our show, and I read the title of her book, Secrets of a Supermom, like she included that obviously in her pitch. And I immediately was like kind of turned off, because I was like, oh, we're so the opposite of trying to like promote that whole like supermom. But then when I delve a little deeper of like how she defines a supermom and like what that really means, and it's like the opposite of that Pinterest perfect image that we think is what we're supposed to be. So I liked it. And then I really like her. She's so down to earth.
Yes.
And it was really such like a great conversation about do what works for you. Like if you want to work outside the home and work in corporate America, go for it. You want to be an entrepreneur, go for it. You want to be a stay-at-home mom, go for it. Like, what does a supermom look like to you? It's not about somebody else's standards. And she's just really, she kind of like, she's one of those people that like walks the walk. And so and it showed in the episode.
Yeah, it was a really good episode. I liked it.
Okay, so the next one for me was, again, going back to one of our series, and this was episode I did. It was a series on ADD or ADHD, right? And the one I chose to highlight was episode 340, which was Adult ADHD Diagnosis and Insights with Christy Lingo. That's kind of a mouthful, but it's the episode with Christy Lingo. Christy, we've known her for years. She actually used to be one of our partners when she was a professional organizer, but then she kind of pivoted her business and now does like ADHD kind of mompreneur coaching. But her story, she came in and talked about being diagnosed as an adult with ADHD and having neurotypical kids and the strategies that she's had to put in place. We did a whole series on ADHD and how that impacts your life in different ways. And I got to tell you, like, I just did a speaking thing the other day, and I don't even think I told you this. And one of the women came up to me and said afterwards and said, I loved your series on ADHD. It was like so, like, it really, really resonated with me. So I've
Yeah.
heard not just from myself, but from other people, the takeaways that they've gotten. And there really is such a correlation between how a neurodiverse ADHD brain works and how you can, the strategies that you need to apply to be organized with your physical space, with your calendar. We talk about time blindness, which is a very real thing. Just there's so many of all these moving parts, and Christy does a great job really breaking it down.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I like that episode too. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. And so
that whole series was good. It was, and I think it helped. I think, that series you also had your daughter on talking about, going through college with ADHD and, just how it is for all spectrums of your life.
Yeah. And I already planned, we haven't like mapped it out, but I know that I want to do some follow-up series and episodes on that in 2024. So
for sure.
Yeah. All
All
right.
right.
What's your drum roll? Your drum roll episode.
Episode 364, Honest Parenting with Meredith Masony. Right?
Yes.
No.
Yes. I know. I always pronounce her last name wrong.
I think it's Masony.
It is Masony, because I keep wanting to call it Masoni, and she's like, no, like Sony, and she's like, no, it's Mason E. And so
I just like this episode most because, I'm a little bit of a fangirl. I've been following her for years and years. And I remember telling you, like, I'm so excited she's going to be on the show. And, she just has a very blunt way of describing parenthood. And that's kind of how I roll. I'm a very blunt, forward person. So I identified with that a lot. I think she only swore once in the episode, so
I know. And yeah, so for you guys, if you haven't listened to it, so Meredith runs the Instagram handle. That's inappropriate. So she's big Instagram and TikTok sensation. And she basically, busts on her husband and kids in these quick little video snippets that are super relatable. But yeah, it was great. It was a super fun episode. And she's, she's like us. She's tell it like it is. And yeah, it was awesome. So I like that one. And I knew that I suspected that would have been on your top five.
It was one of my favorites for sure. Okay. Definitely my favorite of this year. Not that the other ones aren't, I like them, but this one, it's just, she's very real. And I just love that.
Yes. All right. So my top episode, my personal favorite, and this was tough because it was a toss up between this one and the John Deloney, but I went with episode 330, which is Am I a Hoarder with Matt Paxton, for a couple of reasons. So Matt has become a friend of mine over the past couple of years. He's been a repeat guest. If you've listened to some of our other best of and top episodes, he's been on them before. He started his career doing cleanouts and ended up on the show Hoarders as one of the cleanout experts. And now he writes and speaks all about, hoarding disorder with people. And one of the most common things that I get when people are like, oh, you're a professional organizer. Oh, so-and-so's a hoarder. People throw that word around.
They do.
And a lot of times it's just like in a kind of self-deprecation. And other times people really think that, so-and-so might be, or my spouse is a hoarder or whatever. And I wanted Matt to come on and really give an honest description of what a true hoarder is, because he works with people that are hoarders, and I don't. I mean, I work with people who are very disorganized. They may have chronic disorganization. They may struggle with other things, but like a true hoarder home is just like above my pay grade. And so, and most of my organizer friends as well, right? There's a very specific type of organizing specialists that work with people with true hoarding disability. So I wanted Matt to come on and talk about that. And I got a lot of feedback from people like, thank you so much. This just just gave me so much perspective into, you know, my mother, my sister, whatever it was. And, you know, Matt's just great. It's always fun time when he's on the show. And so it was hard. There was a lot of really good episodes, but
there was. Yeah. And I like the way Matt breaks things down. He doesn't make you feel bad for it either. The way that he talks about hoarding, you know, he doesn't like shame anybody, you know,
100%.
And he really understands the psychological piece of it and the emotional piece of someone who is a hoarder. And he really liked his perspective on, you know, they have to get help. They have to go through, you know, classes or therapy to be able to combat their hoarding disability.
Yeah, because it is something that it's not just about, let me just get in and clean the stuff out and then the problem's going to go away. It's not.
Yeah, it doesn't do that. No.
And the fact that he really just at the end of the day, if there's one takeaway, it's just that hoarding is stemmed out of trauma, some sort of trauma. And that just gives a whole other element of grace for people that
sure.
You know, looking either they're dealing with it, whether it was in their own family or somebody, you know, close to them. So I encourage you to check out all of these episodes if you haven't. And again, we'll link to all of them in our show notes. And then next week, we're going to be back with our top 10 episodes, right? So from our listeners. So from you guys, what were our most popular episodes? So you heard from Kimberly and me what our personal faves are. Next week, we're going to talk about what your personal faves are. So if you're not already following our show, if this is the first time you stumbled across our best of episode, like you're in for a treat because we just gave you a cheat sheet of where to start. Click the subscribe, follow button, leave us a review if you feel so inclined. And again, if you are interested in supporting our show and not having our ads, check out our subscription model and see if that's something that makes sense for you. Either way, we appreciate that you're here and continue to tune in each and every week. So anything else, Kimberly?
That's it.
All right, guys. We'll talk to you next week for our final episode of 2023. Until then, I'm Laurie Plow. Peace out. Thanks for tuning in. If you like this episode, please spread the love and share it with your friends. And if this is your first time joining us, make sure to click the subscribe button wherever you are listening so you never miss an episode. And while you're there, please leave us a review so other people know that our show is worth the listen. You can also find us on YouTube and Instagram at This Organized Life Podcast. And if you'd like to connect with us, you can head on over to our website at simply the letter B like boy organized.com, which is filled with tons of resources, including free downloads, checklists, links to our amazing organizing partners, and all of our digital offerings. I'll see you next week for another episode of This Organized Life.